Imagine waking up inside your favorite novel, but instead of being the hero, you're the loser villain everyone forgets after chapter 20. That's Moon Campbell's nightmare. Once a modern nobody, he reincarnates into the blonde trash noble destined to get stomped on by the OP heroine, betrayed by his family, and tossed into the gutter. But wait, things don't go as planned. A mysterious black book appears. Future visions warn him of torture, betrayal, and a fate worse than death. The ice princess he's supposed to drug, she's OP enough to freeze the world. The maid at his side, obsessed, dangerous, and maybe the real villain of this story. Now he's caught in a twisted game. Change the story and risk unleashing chaos, or follow fate straight into ruin. Can a so-called trash villain flip the script, or will he be crushed under the weight of destiny? At that moment, this became the most foolish action of the era. Someone began to say the words, Trashville, but their sentence was abruptly cut off. The item had been introduced as a new element within the game. In this world, every character possessed overwhelming strength. The speaker began to wonder if someone with Mars Fuller figure could. At this moment, the main character's odds of success had dwindled to nearly nothing. Some would argue that the situation is dreadful, as his brother suffers greatly because of it. The young woman dressed in a maid's uniform, by someone known as the Ice Princess. The situation involved a girl who resembled, at least in concept, the true main character. The kind of torment she experienced was beyond ordinary suffering. Someone acknowledged the clever remark with a nod of approval. There was an option that was even more appealing. He told his friend to make a choice and pick a pill. The words in the air labeled someone as a pathetic failure desperate to be a hero. Confident, blonde antagonist found himself overpowered and brought low. The child was encouraged by their mother. After being created, it shifts to the next stage. Someone reached out to take hold of something. The character realized it would be wise to stop now, knowing the video might be removed soon. At this moment, things began to take a turn for the worse for Bro. He is able to glimpse what lies ahead. He would end up trapped inside a dungeon. The character decided to take on the role of the mechanic. Each day, one of the girls was assigned the task of emptying the bull toy. She felt such sympathy for him that she would have given her own help. They wished they could switch places with someone else. He truly believed he was a hero. In addition, he had already experienced battles. The character marched off to fight in the battle. He mentioned that in a year when he returned, he needed to make sure he had got one of the maids pregnant because of the situation. The desire to provide new heirs became clear, and that was the goal she wished to pursue. She compared managing her family to operating a business. Amidst everything happening at the moment, the boy seemed much weaker than the wild and powerful girls who lived in this world. In order to withstand the wrath unleashed by the true main character, the character possessed an unbelievable amount of power. The question lingered in the air as everyone wondered if he would really be able to succeed. The response held no significance. The group had arrived with one goal in mind, to catch a glimpse of some curvy women eager to start their search. The story begins within the Grand Castle, where the Campbell family resides. The protagonist began to question whether Meg had just lost her life in a car accident. The character wondered if the car crash had somehow made them travel through time. The decoration had a distinctly European style. Reflection in the mirror resembled how the narrator appeared during their late teenage years, around 17 or 18. The statement didn't add up, considering he was much older at this point. He glanced again, a hint of surprise flickering in his eyes, realizing that in his younger days he had actually been quite handsome, before life changed him into someone struggling and out of shape. As he reflected on his life, he started to realize that age was catching up with him, especially since he'd begun having dreams about being reborn simply because things hadn't gone the way he'd hoped. He picked up a small knife, explaining that he needed to make sure. Blood bursts forth in a sudden, forceful stream. He insists that the wound is only minor. Despite the intense pain, he found himself compelled to soothe his aching fingers, silently admitting that the sensation was disturbingly lifelike. Without warning, a flood of memories surges into their mind. Moon Campbell was the name of the person he became after reincarnation. Once stripped of all his titles, Moon fell into poverty, was left to beg on the streets, and eventually was deserted by his own family. His father had threatened him with death if he ever returned to their property, making it clear there would be no forgiveness. It seemed he was guilty of a serious wrongdoing. He covered his face with his hand, realizing with a troubled expression that what he had assumed was mere coincidence was actually something more deliberate. By some twist of fate, he found himself inhabiting the body of that simple-minded character, the blonde-haired antagonist who lacked any real talent or status. Many years he would spend his time reading a story known as The Protagonist. The tale featured the most powerful woman ever recorded in history. Just by glancing at the title, anyone could predict the plot. It followed a familiar formula, except with a female lead at its center. Her family turned their backs on her, forcing her to venture out on her own. Throughout her journey, she honed her abilities, defeated fearsome creatures, and eventually rose to legendary status as a hero. When the game began, Moon Campbell, also known as That Guy, quickly became a troublesome opponent by dispatching several people to defeat her. Despite these challenges, she managed to gain experience rapidly and became much stronger. Ultimately, his scheme fell apart, leading to his expulsion from the mansion and subsequent exile, forcing him to live as a beggar. After 20 chapters had passed, everyone had forgotten who he was. Although being reborn sounded exciting, finding oneself in the body of someone meant only to help the main character improve felt far from ideal. At that moment, a knock sounded at the door. He gestures for them to enter. The maid stepped into the room, her face filled with concern as she inquired about the situation. He reassures everyone that the situation is not a cause for concern. She informs him that the attire for the next day's banquet has already arrived. He insisted that she should go and leave him behind. Right then, she spotted something unusual and wondered aloud if he was injured. He brushed off her concern, explaining it was only an accident and not a big deal. The challenge was set, $10 to anyone who could predict her next move. She knelt beside the mess and began wiping up the blood without hesitation. Her dedication to the job was clear, showing she truly earned a higher wage. She pleads with him, urging him not to continue causing himself harm. The boy's cheeks turned a deep shade of red, as he silently promised himself that this memory would stay with him forever. She twirled swiftly, turning to leave, and reminded him to look after himself as she departed. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, he sat in his seat, his cheeks turning red with embarrassment. The character muttered to themselves, expressing the belief that this world was flawless. He hid his face with his hands and waved his arms from side to side, bursting with excitement over having such a remarkable maid. It was clear to everyone that this person stood no chance when it came to launching an attack. Outside the room, the maid found it strange that he had expressed gratitude, suspecting that he must have behaved horribly prior to his reincarnation. People might find themselves curious about how a person, blessed with both noble birth and attractive features, could not only find himself with an adorable maid, but also believe it wise to challenge the main character. It seemed that his exile stemmed from an incident where he allegedly attempted to drug the third princess, or so the rumors suggested. Now that he understood the consequences of that choice, he realized he had to steer clear of it completely. Wanting to hold on to his comfortable lifestyle, his top priority became taking extra caution during the ceremony that would set everything into turmoil. At that moment, he suddenly remembered that the maid with the strong legs had already delivered the clothes he needed for the banquet. She needed to let them know that the event was scheduled for the following day. At that moment, the young man tossed restlessly on his bed, repeatedly pleading for help from the system goddess and grandpa the monk. He refused to offer him any cheats or special abilities. The issue was that, with the banquet taking place the next day, he had already caused significant harm to the protagonist. He silently wishes she won't take things too far, such as stepping on his face. Still, if that happens, he can only hope she's dressed in black tights and doesn't rush. Obviously, his preferences are quite particular. He had finally reached a decision. The next day, the moment he caught sight of her, he would dash over without hesitation, fall to his knees 3 times before her, and plead earnestly for her to forgive him. Without warning, an object struck him on the head, catching him completely off guard. Everyone in the room started shouting, each person demanding to find out who was responsible for what had just happened. At that moment, he notices a small book lying on the bed. He instantly questions whether the cheat has shown up. He picked it up, feeling a surge of hope as he realized that at last, it seemed as though God still believed in him. He was not meant to remain a failure for the rest of his life. At this moment, the opportunity arose to acquire boundless wisdom and transform one's perspective. He took control of his destiny through his own actions. As he flipped the book open, the interior was completely empty. He begins to question whether the device requires a unique method to turn it on. Those tales tend to unfold in European settings, leading one to wonder why that is so common. He recorded the attack in the book while causing his opponent's head to bleed. A single drop of blood lands on the paper. Shadowy energy began to swirl and lift into the air. He begins to question the situation unfolding around him. His eyesight starts to fade, and everything around him grows increasingly unclear. Without warning, he realizes that his hands are resting atop his head. Their feet were tightly bound. The bruises covered his neck as well, showing that he had taken quite a beating. He gradually awakens, his eyes fluttering open as confusion fills him about his surroundings. A strange, unsettling girl appeared and informed him that he had been asleep for a long time. He notes that he feels pain throughout his body. She often remarked that experiencing pain was a natural part of gaining wisdom, never revealing the depth of her sadness that he remained completely unaware of. She regretted seeing him become this way, noticing how his actions had grown increasingly harsh and self-centered. It was supposed to cause suffering for those around him, not display kindness that turned everyone against him. Acting this way was the only method that would keep him tied to her alone. However, his feelings had begun to shift, and she knew this new path would never be acceptable. Despite the time it might require, she remained determined to cleanse him of the love she once carried, believing that only then could they truly be united for all eternity. Suddenly, a flurry of stabbing motions erupted. He opened his eyes to find himself once again in his own bedroom. It seemed that the protagonist might have a greater fondness for him in his role as a villain. If he chooses that direction, his entire life will fall apart. Yet, avoiding it means his life is already in chaos. Faced with these options, he can't figure out what he's meant to do. He begins to question whether what he experienced was a memory from long ago, or a vision of what is yet to come. The entire vision had begun the moment his blood made contact with the book. Perhaps it served as a warning about what might happen if he made the wrong decision. Upon glancing back at the book, he notices that it now reads, "Fate was not meant to be changed." He immediately understands that he carried out the entire scheme of eating 3 times and pleading for pardon. It would have resulted in that consequence. Reflecting on the vision where he had been bound and tormented, he realized that being disowned by his family and reduced to begging no longer seemed quite so terrible in comparison. He felt a surge of determination, his modern thinking and sharp intellect fueling his resolve. With all his knowledge at his disposal, he realized he had the power to transform not just his own destiny, but also the future of the whole nation. In truth, life as an aristocrat held little appeal. Those people were confined to their small, isolated world. Determined to shape his own future, he resolved to depend on himself instead of the privileges of his birth. Despite everything, he was already seated, savoring a tasty cut of meat while quietly marveling to himself about how wonderful a life of luxury could be. Losing everything here would be a terrible experience. Sitting next to him was Campbell, his mother, whose youthful appearance made her look barely older than 18. Dan Woman was also present, noticed her son's cheerful expression and remarked on how happy he seemed that day. His father observed that the boy was likely feeling a rush of excitement because of the upcoming ceremony, which was expected to be among the most significant events in his life. He simply agreed, doing his best to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention. At the same time, his mother insists that he cannot attend the banquet because she worries that every noble girl there would be eager to get his attention. Argues that this could never happen, explaining that he already has princess, and any girl who dares approach him would only make the princess jealous. His mother, trying to appear endearing, expressed her disapproval of, insisting that lacked charm and was unworthy of her son. The boy sat in bewilderment, unable to understand why his parents trusted him so deeply after the way he had acted. Questions swirled in his mind, especially about the mysterious, whose identity remained a puzzle to him. That moment realization dawns on him. She is the third princess, the very person he once attempted to poison. This connection means she is destined to become a source of chaos in his future. While the original tale portrayed her as universally beloved, the reality before him is different. She is the typical type, appearing distant and aloof, yet hiding a gentle nature beneath her cool exterior. He mentally takes note of this revelation. Un found himself sinking into a low mood as he came to understand that his parents were genuinely decent people. The truth hit him. He had been expelled from his home because of his own terrible behavior, and his father simply couldn't bear to raise a son who turned out so poorly. Despite the risks, this only strengthens his determination to alter his destiny. He refuses to let his choices become a burden for his entire family. People came to believe that his father had commanded him to assassinate the princess, an act seen as treachery, and this belief ultimately led to his family's downfall. He realized that the best course of action would be to accept responsibility alone, ensuring that nobody else became entangled in the situation. The issue was that the ceremony would take place the very next day, leaving no opportunity to make any major changes. He found it odd that, with the event approaching so soon, he still had no information about the drug he was expected to use. He wondered if someone would simply give it to him at the last minute, leaving him uncertain about what was really supposed to take place. As he struggled to make sense of the situation, a maid appeared, and he unintentionally collided with her. She awkwardly tumbles, insisting that he was responsible for knocking over the madame's black tea. As he approached to check on her well-being, she instinctively recoiled, bracing herself for a scolding. Noticing the tea that had splashed onto him, she hurried over to help wipe it away. The instant she catches sight of the chaos, despair immediately overwhelms her, making her believe that everything is ruined. She was certain that she would lose her job, and imagined herself forced to eat dog food on the sidewalk by the next day. The protagonist comes to understand that others already know about him before he even arrives. He reassured her that she had nothing to fear, promising that no punishment would come her way. The boy moved with confidence, effortlessly drawing the girl into a comforting embrace and urging her to stay calm. He stood there, puzzled, attempting to understand the young master's actions. In truth, the observer shared her confusion, silently questioning the strange position of his hands. Anne appeared just then and called his name, trying to get his attention. He inquired about the girl's name, learning that she was called Noelle. Then he instructed Anne to look after her, and reminded Noelle that their attention had to remain on preparing everything for the next day, insisting that now was not the time for them to be lazy. He simply instructed her to bring in additional workers for assistance. It seemed unbelievable to him that such a huge mansion could be so understaffed. He gave a respectful bow and agreed to proceed. As usual, the charming speaker managed to stall for time as he strolled away. Noelle found it unusual that the young master, who had always refused assistance in the past by claiming others were unclean, was now the one proposing it, and mentioned that she had observed something unusual as well. She thought it might be wiser to advance their plan before the situation became unmanageable. Inside the boy's room, he rummaged through every box, searching intently. The type of poison capable of defeating the third princess must be a rare and costly hallucinogen, far beyond ordinary substances. At that moment, he discovers a card from the black market. It was evident that the money had likely gone toward purchasing the drink she eventually consumed. The focus moves to the bustling marketplace within the chamber. As night deepened, the protagonist instructed the others to remain where they were before heading out alone to purchase some items. He slipped quietly through the area, blending in so well that few paid him any attention, all the while struggling to recall the path he'd heard described in the story. Eventually, he came upon a door and muttered the words, "Sewer rats," under his breath. He presented his credentials, prompting the man to greet him warmly as a guest and invite him inside. Scene unfolded within the bustling confines of the black market. Potions, ingredients, and magical creatures filled the scene, even those that were artificial. As expected in such settings, the establishment dealt in slaves. Interestingly, one of the main character's companions had once been bought from here. Despite that being less important, his attention remained fixed on the more pressing issues he faced at the moment. He stepped into one of the rooms, where a person wearing a cat mask welcomed him. Shopkeeper quickly inquires about his needs, mentioning their wide selection of potions. He responds by specifying that he seeks one without color or scent, particularly effective on magic users, and capable of rendering someone unconscious for several hours. Although it seems likely he will purchase the potion and put it to use, it appears he has no intention of harming the girl. This development leaves the observer puzzled as well. He attempts to keep track of the unfolding events, but the observer admits to being uncertain about his true intentions now. The individual wearing the cat mask suggests that he seems interested in having an exciting experience. She adds that, if he desires, she could suggest a few slaves for him. He announced his intention to leave, but she quickly intervened, urging him to wait while she fetched the potion. Moon observes that it's impossible to determine whether the person is male or female. Challenge was undeniable. Whoever had illustrated this character truly made it difficult for anyone to identify. The uncertainty was intimidating, making it hard to even attempt a guess. Deciding it was best to avoid taking sides, everyone agreed to keep their opinions neutral. Human quickly picked up a potion, as the protagonist silently marveled at how amazing the person's physique appeared. It was highly probable that the mastermind behind the entire underworld network was an impressive woman, known for both her striking appearance and commanding presence. Just then, the door swings open once more. Another person entered the room. Based on the sight of the black tights, it was clear what was about to happen. The thought arose whether the young man was also observant enough to notice such details. The individual explains their intention to purchase a powerful drug specifically designed to affect mages, one that disappears completely without leaving any evidence. Seller finds herself puzzled, noticing that a potion she hardly ever sells has suddenly become the center of attention, with many people now seeking it. Moon was surprised, realizing he never expected women to have preferences like that as well. He sympathizes with the person who will soon face that difficult situation, yet recognizes he is powerless to offer any assistance. The woman flung 2 small vials onto the table, explaining that these were what everyone had been searching for. Although the substance glowed with a vivid hue, blending it into wine rendered it completely undetectable. Only a small amount was needed, yet even that wouldn't be powerful enough to put an elephant to sleep for several hours. He finds himself amazed by its incredible strength. The masked girl insisted that, if he doubted her claim, he was welcome to test it on his own. She explained that he would need to spend 3 hours sleeping on the floor and would still be required to pay the entire fee. The price, however, amounted to 130,000, which was the currency used in that area. The masked woman standing close by explains that she does not possess item, but offers an alternative method of payment. She holds up a letter for everyone to see. The seller found it difficult to take an item of such worth as a form of payment. Carefully examined the contents, her curiosity growing as she wondered aloud whether the information could possibly be accurate. The enigmatic stranger assured her that she was welcome to check its authenticity using her own abilities. Despite the air of secrecy, it was clear to everyone it could only be Anne behind the mask. The seller agreed and handed the potion over to her. The woman wearing a mask quickly picks up the object, expresses her gratitude, and begins to make her way out. At the same time, Moon simply instructs the staff to put the expense on his credit card. The seller offered an extra potion as a bonus, mentioning its special value. He realized that merging it with the other would greatly enhance the overall experience. He expressed his gratitude, carefully placed the item in his bag, and inquired about the information that the other woman had provided to her. Seller, showing little regard for the truth, claims that the items once belonged to some longtime acquaintances. If he hoped to get the information at a reasonable rate, he would need to pay 900,000. He gazes at her, allowing her to see herself reflected in his eyes. He looked away and made it clear he had no interest. Con artist attempted to demand 7 times the usual cost from him without any shame. However, he refused to be deceived. Coming from the modern era, he could easily recognize a scam when it appeared. The moment the door shuts, the seller expressed her hope of meeting him again in the near future. Figure removed her mask, revealing herself to be a woman. Now fully aware of the events about to unfold at the mansion, she considered which buyer would pay the most for the valuable information she possessed. The most intriguing option seemed to be selling it to both parties, which would unleash complete chaos. It seemed possible that she was the main character, especially since her appearance matched that distinct protagonist's style. The following evening, the Campbell Palace buzzed with. Amidst the crowd of confused nobles milling about, he stood directly in the center, unmistakably present. A man with a mustache arrived, bringing along his third daughter, and expressed his hope that she could have the chance to meet the young Mr. Campbell. She cast a quick look at the boy, her body beginning to shake with fear. She quickly ran away, her dress billowing behind her, shouting that her mother needed her. To an observer, her hurried departure seemed driven more by fear than any other emotion. The father offers an apology, explaining that his daughter feels a little frightened, while Mood reassures him that everything is all right. At that moment, he begins to realize that he isn't paying attention to any of the girls around him. He did not appear pleased to see him. His tarnished reputation had clearly left its mark. Despite everything, the father rests his hand on his son's shoulder and expresses his admiration for the boy's recent actions. He tells him that he is truly rising to the occasion, and that, after tonight, he will no longer be just a boy, but will take on the responsibilities of the Campbell family's man. Grateful, Moon expresses his appreciation and promises to give his best effort. Without warning, a voice from the doorway requests everyone to quiet down. The arrival of the Empire's third heir to the throne was imminent. Gifted with the untainted essence of snow, that people recognized as the ice goddess. The third princess, character appears who bears a striking resemblance to, from Impact, announced his intention to socialize with the other guests, and requested that Moon look after her in his absence. Moon entered without hesitation, announcing the princess's presence. He remarked on how much time had passed since they last met, and noted how good she looked. She even wore tiny sparkles in her hair, almost as if they were her form of payment. The observer was struck by how impressive the girl's gifts were, silently amazed. Grateful for the recognition, she expressed her thanks to him. He behaved with unusual kindness and tenderness. He began to sense that something was wrong. He remarked that she was probably exhausted after the journey. He encourages her to take a break and get some rest. As she made her way forward, every noble she passed lowered their heads in a respectful bow. She wondered to herself why he was acting so unusually courteous today, unable to shake the feeling that something about his behavior was different. At that instant, Campbell appears to catch snippets of a conversation nearby about an illegitimate daughter rumored to have dueled her own husband, leaving her just as bewildered as anyone else. Many people avoided her, judging her harshly for being born out of wedlock, going through a divorce, and now hoping to prove herself as an heir. The others in the group quickly urged everyone to stop making such harsh comments, insisting that those kinds of rumors were nonsense. Naturally, everyone expected the arrival of the protagonist, the central figure in this story. Ariel appeared, standing on the left with her dark hair. Although she seemed rather ordinary, her role as the main character felt appropriate. Most main characters tended to look quite ordinary, often with dark hair and simple features. Meanwhile, she blended in perfectly, behaving as usual and offering a polite greeting to Mr. Moon. He acted uneasy as he replied that he was doing well and greeted her warmly. Suddenly, an imposing man appeared and questioned how she dared to address the young master in such a manner. She acted with a laid-back attitude, while the young man sharply instructed the other person to be quiet. He assured everyone that it was okay for her to speak however she liked, feeling that he had already shown more than enough courtesy. At that moment, she nearly loses control of her emotions. She found herself puzzled by the sudden change in his behavior. The man who once acted as if she were an unwanted child now spoke her name correctly, leaving her to question the reason behind his newfound attention. Ariel's friends stared at her in bewilderment, unaware of what was happening, when suddenly a voice called out for Miss, and a hand extended toward them. Campbell's use of her complete name, Miss Angel, left another person visibly surprised. He extends his hand toward her, yet Ariel swiftly bats it aside. She urges him to stop plotting and put an end to his scheming behavior. He seized his arm and insisted that he pay attention to her. He was present due to his father's involvement, so he knew he couldn't risk any suspicious actions. If he dared to consider hurting her, she was determined to ensure he wouldn't leave the place unharmed. As she turned and left, the observer found themselves already fond of her. Though she acted like a noble hero, both of them understood that she secretly hoped he would stir up some mischief. Wu reflects that, as he anticipated, handling the protagonist will be challenging. Despite this, he claims it doesn't matter much to him. When the night is over, she will leave to follow her own path, he will pursue his, and their lives will separate for good. Shortly after he finishes delivering his speech. It seemed that today was his birthday, something that had gone unnoticed by most. He had just reached his 18th year. The crowd erupted into applause, expressing their admiration for his incredible performance. The young man nearly loses control again, but he manages to compose himself as the moment calls for serious focus. He glanced around the area and noticed something. A figure resembling the payment lounged casually near the mirror, exuding an air of nonchalance. He approached, offered his name, and expressed regret, hoping he wasn't coming across as impolite. He politely requests the privilege of dancing with her, leaving her to wonder in surprise if he now considers himself some kind of prince. She agrees without hesitation. The girl stands out, her outfit radiating confidence and strength. The accessories she wears seem ready to break free, overflowing with bold energy. At the same time, the noble stood tense and uneasy, their eyes darting about the room. The main character stands apart from the others, quietly enjoying a slice of cake. As she observed, he moved gracefully across the floor with the third princess. She admired the way he moved, while he admitted that he was just starting to learn. She notices the significant changes in him, and observes that he is at last behaving with the dignity expected of a noble. She found it strange the way he had invited her to dance earlier. The figure declared their intent to offer the warrior a final, merciful gesture, a dance, and reminded the warrior to show appreciation for this rare kindness. He hesitantly urges her to let it go, and suggests they should move on from it. Music began to fill the air. The story plunged further into its twists as the characters lost themselves in the dance. She admired him with her words, offering compliments as they moved together, just as she always did, until something unexpected happened. He moved in right behind, curiosity flickering in his eyes as if he were summoning a teammate for support, just like an adventurer would. At that moment, she insisted that they should speak alone. She understood that their marriage had been arranged solely for political reasons by their families. He responds by assuring her that, if she wishes to cancel, they can collaborate to ensure it gets done. She gently leaned away and assured him that they would discuss the matter further at another time. She suggested that they go to his room immediately. He was clearly surprised and unprepared for what just happened. However, she had already taken his hand and started to lead him away before he could react. Standing at the edge of the room, a pair of playful maids observed the scene with curious eyes, taking in every detail as events progressed. People around them began to murmur quietly, spreading rumors about the girl who had left with the master known for his mental challenges. The unspoken insult lingered in their minds, though no one said it out loud. Urgency filled their whispers as they insisted they must move quickly, since that area now belonged to Lionheart. Once they returned to the room, he handed her a drink, but she gently refused, explaining that she wasn't able to consume even the smallest amount. Moon now faced a serious dilemma, completely clueless about the method the original protagonist used to win the girl's heart. He also faced the challenge of giving her the potion, but since she wasn't consuming any drinks, he had no idea how he could accomplish this task. He wondered about her preferred drink, and at first she mentioned coffee, but then she hesitated and switched her choice, suggesting they have black tea instead. It became clear that the only drinks offered in that location were black tea and wine. He appeared slightly confused, yet he dismissed her concerns with a gesture and assured her that he would go and bring her back himself. While she sat there looking a bit puzzled, he eagerly himself with preparing the tea, his excitement clear in every movement. Could clearly be seen sneaking the potion into the drink. At first, it seemed like he was using the sleeping potion, but unexpectedly he claimed that just a single drop of this one would make someone fall in love. Additionally, he possessed a second vial, but he hesitated to use it, uncertain about what it might do. At that moment she summoned him, which turned out to be fortunate. Sudden noise startled him, causing him to spin around and announce that it was nearly finished. During the frantic twirl, a portion of the potion splashed everywhere, and unexpectedly the second vial revealed itself to be an aphrodisiac. He feels a sense of relief, knowing that the potions do not leave any magical evidence behind. Everything changes the moment he glances downward. At that moment, she notices that a significant portion of the potion has spilled onto the floor. He had intended to sell just a small portion to earn some money, but now that idea was no longer possible. As he carries the tea across the room, the scene reveals. Figure could be seen secretly watching from behind the window pane. Despite being the third princess, someone observed that the black tea served by the Campbell family appeared unusually bright and red, with a glossy sheen. He explains that the herb is a very rare delicacy from the East. She agreed to the plan and suggested that he should be the one to take the first sip. The young man questioned, doubting her trust in him despite his reputation for honesty as Moon Campbell, a noble youth. In response, reminded him that servants were expected to sample any drink before their masters, following the fundamental rules of noble conduct. As he raised the cup and moved to sit down, before he could take a sip, she quickly grabbed the drink from his hand, remarking that his seemed more appealing and suggesting they trade. After just a single small drink, she already appeared unsteady on her feet. She had expected it to have an aphrodisiac effect. Despite her efforts, she lost her balance and staggered. The cup slipped from their grasp and tumbled to the ground. He collapses directly onto the couch, losing consciousness. Moon believed it was clever to ensure that both cups had been drugged. In the original tale, it was only a matter of moments before the main character would storm into the room, intent on ending his life. He needed her to appear more suspicious, so he decided to adjust her skirt downward slightly. She loosened a few buttons on her outfit. He removed his shirt. After examining the result, she nodded in approval, satisfied that everything appeared flawless. Anyone entering the room would immediately believe whatever impression he intended to give. It seemed clear that he was purposefully setting himself up to be judged harshly. Nothing occurs, which is the main issue. As the minutes slipped away, 30 minutes elapsed without anyone appearing. This seemed unusual, since in the original tale she would have rushed in right away to handle things. The character wondered what had caused things to be different. In the story, the main character strolls along. As she walked through the crowded halls, a person accidentally collided with her, causing their drink to splash across her dress. She unknowingly stumbles into the chaotic scene. At that moment, he recalls a possibility. Perhaps it was Noel who accidentally knocked over the tea. Earlier, he had instructed Anne to allow Noel some time to recover. The unexpected development likely disrupted the whole sequence of events. Someone noticed as she began to stir, remarking on her awakening. He remained focused on his elaborate scheme, unaware that the girl was beginning to rise. It appeared that the aphrodisiac had ended up in the cup she quickly grabbed from him. Now, he stood in place, puzzled and trying to figure out why the atmosphere in the room seemed to chill so abruptly. Suddenly, a hand shot out and clamped over his face. A surge of icy magic forcefully knocks him down to the ground. He pleaded with to stay calm, assuring her that he had an explanation. She quickly puts an end to it. He dismissed the need for any explanations, insisting that it was better to leave things unsaid. At that moment, he notices that there is something unusual about the girl. Deciding to take action, he announces his intention to find a doctor. His wrists had already been restrained before he could react. She quietly mentioned that her body was both cold and warm at the same time. He pleaded with her to relax, but she refused to listen. He leans forward and kisses him. Meanwhile, he silently hopes for Ariel to appear and rescue him, knowing that without her intervention, this situation might quickly turn serious. Turning to the subject of the difficult task at hand, the focus shifted. She moved down the hallway, irritation clear on her face as she noticed the stain on her dress. Suddenly, unusual noises reach her ears. At that moment, Anne appeared and informed her that she wasn't allowed in this section. Ariel notices something unusual, while Anne promptly steps in to help by offering to wash the dress, believing that will solve the problem. She begins to utter the words to cast the spell dispel, but stops before finishing the incantation. Ariel noticed how immaculate the outfit appeared, and felt genuinely amazed that even the maids in this place were skilled in using magic. At that moment, one of the maids made an offhand remark about a cake. They mentioned that these would be offered during the party. The protagonist's face brightened with happiness as gratitude filled her voice, expressing thanks to the other person in a cheerful manner. A small, gentle smile appears on their face. He spun back around, her expression shifting into that familiar, sinister grin. Ariel's instincts told her something was wrong, as if she could catch the scent of blood drifting through the air. She hesitated, questioning her own judgment, uncertain whether she was being perceptive or simply foolish. She quickly dismissed the thought, reminding herself that she was inside the Duke's mansion and had no intention of getting involved. She felt certain that was more than capable of dealing with the pampered child without any help. With cake being the ultimate treat, she had no concerns about the situation at all. In the vicinity, the suspicious maids speculate among themselves about whether Ariel was the intended victim. The girl with gray hair shook her head in refusal. She had once been the target of someone called Number 9, who outranked her, but she had succeeded in defeating him. The maid with the darker hair urges her companion to move faster, cautioning that their mission might be jeopardized if Campbell arrives. Their partner, however, reassured them that there was no need for concern. She had assessed the scene, and events were unfolding rapidly all around her. At the same time, the boy appeared completely worn out, covered in scratches and fatigue. Confusion washed over him as he tried to process what had just occurred. He paused, attempting to make sense of the situation. Nothing of note had truly occurred. He had been desperately trying to protect himself, but now, as he regained consciousness, he found looming over him. Pressed a sword to his face, insisting he speak his last words. He attempts to soothe her, but she insists that he is departing for the afterlife in silence. He felt anxiety rising within him as uncertainty clouded his mind, unsure if another chance at reincarnation awaited him. He suddenly confessed that his feelings were genuine and rooted in true love. He stood in that moment, radiating deep feelings, silently wishing the deities would offer him another opportunity. He reached for another slice, but narrowly avoided getting it cut open. She regarded him with icy disdain, thinking to herself how utterly repulsive he was. He offers an apology and tries to calm her down, explaining that nothing serious actually happened between them. He quickly retorted, accusing him of being disgusting for labeling those genuine gestures as anything less than sincere. Had he genuinely put in the effort to earn her affection, she might have agreed to marry him. Rather than choosing an honest path, he resorted to underhanded methods, relying on substances and deception to get his way. He attempts to clarify that offending her was never his intention. Before he can finish, she interrupts and commands him to kneel. Without warning, a figure emerged from the opposite side of the door. Something draws her gaze. She reaches out, her hand closing firmly around his neck, preparing to act. He finds himself compelled to order everyone outside to go away. She shoved him to the ground, ordering him to put on his clothes and face whoever was knocking, since she believed he wouldn't live much longer anyway. The unfortunate man found himself facing three grim choices. He could lose his life at his hands, be executed by the king, or wind up imprisoned in a bizarre dungeon by an unknown figure. For a moment, he wondered if the person he saw was the main character, but quickly realized it was just another madman. At the same time, the other girl nonchalantly slipped into her tights, remarking that his death was only moments away. Moon gently pushes open the door, curious to discover who has come to visit. The character leaped into the air. A familiar maid appeared once again, mentioning that she had shared some time with them and had brought along a meal. He instructed her to place it down and expressed his gratitude. He suddenly becomes aware that the girl is a complete stranger to him, leaving him to wonder about her identity. She explained that she had been employed to assist with the banquet preparations, though she found it odd since there were not meant to be any new maids or additional staff members hired. She nods in agreement and, without warning, she rushed ahead and sent him tumbling to the ground. At that instant, he understands that what she truly wants is money. She jumped forward, clutching a knife in each hand. A sudden explosion shattered the silence. He lifts his gaze. Despite the circumstances, the Ice Queen succeeded in protecting herself. Insisted on finding out whether her foolish brother was responsible for sending this assassin. The maid responds by explaining that, regrettably, she cannot share the information because it is confidential. A different chamber, shimmering golden spheres hovered in the air, murmuring among themselves about the princess's impending death that night at the Campbell estate. That moment marked the downfall of an unknown individual. Although the girl with white hair remained a mystery, she appeared to understand the situation perfectly. After the blast, the group found themselves back inside the room. The maid stepped away, confessing her surprise at just how concentrated its magic truly was. Her face shifts noticeably as the words of the incantation reach her ears. Surged forward, brandishing an ice spear, and came dangerously close to striking. The spear narrowly misses her head, coming dangerously close to piercing her skull. As the pair moved toward the end, the harsh and unforgiving classroom environment, the young man reflected on the situation, realizing that when deities clashed, it was ordinary people who paid the price. He understood that he was completely powerless to change anything. He attempts once more to open the door, only to find it firmly locked. Despite this, their determination remains unwavering. He crouched behind a nearby object, suddenly understanding that the relentless maid had likely used a powerful barrier spell to block anyone else from entering. At that moment, he becomes aware of a new detail. Just yesterday, a decision had been made to alter the original plan by bringing in employees from outside the company. It seemed that the only explanation for such a prepared plan was that someone had been sharing information ahead of time. He barely avoids being struck by an incoming attack. Now the only thing left for him to do is hope that emerges victorious. He glanced in her direction. Despite being battered and clutching the spear tightly, he remained standing with a defiant intensity. He begins to question whether this is truly something positive, realizing that she could end his life as well. She wondered if it might not be so terrible to meet her end in this place, believing that her secret would remain hidden forever. That moment the maid remarked on remarkable intelligence. In turn, admitted she could sense another person interfering with her movements through gravitational magic. This revelation meant a third party was involved. Without hesitation, insisted the maid reveal this person's identity, warning that if she refused, neither of them would leave the place alive. The major acknowledges that the rumors were true, really does possess remarkable intelligence. Lost his patience, and demanded that she be quiet and answer his question about who was responsible for the situation, warning her that revealing the truth was her only hope of mercy. The maid insists that her purpose is not to harm anyone. They were merely stalling for a little longer. Without warning, the entire room begins to tremble. At that moment, the maid with gray hair announced that the chamber had been completely sealed. The second person slips her hand into her pocket and retrieves a small vial. She announced her intention to present the lives of 100 children as a tribute to the ruler of the melted world. Payment immediately realizes that the energy belongs to a dark god. The maid simply smiled and requested that he descend to bring this world under control. Red energy surged through the room, filling every corner with its vibrant glow. The payment was forcefully pressed against the wall. She realizes that if the rats appear at this moment, she will have no hope of escaping. The maid nodded in agreement, acknowledging that rats were indeed present. However, she revealed that the true objective that evening was the princess. She prepared herself and launched forward, attempting another attack. Swiftly seized the dagger from the protagonist's grasp. The attack is intercepted and stopped. The maid's eyes widened in disbelief as astonishment washed over her face. The girl's tights were stained with blood, torn and battered, her body pushed to the brink of exhaustion. Despite her injuries, she had managed to protect the most critical areas from harm. It made no difference in the end, as she had completely exhausted her supply of blood magic. A fierce kick landed on her ribs, knocking her off balance. Colliding with the ground, unlike others, possessed a unique strength. She rises to her feet once more. The assassin assures her target that she intends to end her life swiftly and without pain. The attacker surged forward, aiming to deliver a decisive strike. Blood splatters through the air, yet the outcome holds an unexpected twist. The boy leaped forward, placing himself in harm's way to absorb the impact. Faced the blow directly, making no attempt to shield himself or avoid it. The action was unguarded without any effort to lessen the impact. It was an act of undeniable bravery. Thinking back, there was a time when the main character found himself trapped at the table. Most likely, Anne was the mastermind behind that situation. It puzzled him that he hadn't realized the connection earlier. The answer seemed obvious in hindsight. Anne was responsible. After all, her image was featured right on the cover of the story. With that realization, the focus shifted back to the unfolding events. Called out his name, leaving curious about her reason. He lies sprawled across the ground, blood trickling from his mouth, when a memory abruptly flashes through his mind. Earlier, after another maid had entered and informed him that he was free to go, he had been permitted to leave. He thought about escaping, yet soon understood that it was impossible for him. He raised his voice, attempting to get Anne's attention. He wonders what she believes she's doing. The speaker dismisses the other person, insisting that they stop interfering and calling them useless. Moved right by without stopping. He brings his weapon down in a swift motion, cutting deeply into her neck. The girl falls to her knees, letting the eye slip from her grasp. The princess calmly announces that everything has come to an end. The boy now lay sprawled across the floor, his grip on life growing weaker with each passing moment. Dropped to her knees next to him, her mind racing with the realization that his attempt to shield her meant he couldn't have been the one who sent the assassins. What unsettled her most was how he instinctively shielded her, acting without hesitation or concern for recognition, since her death would have meant his actions remained forever hidden. He claims that those things no longer hold any importance. True to her words, he decided to carry himself with the courage and integrity expected of a real man. That blow stung more than expected, but then again, nothing less could be anticipated from. He observes him with a chilly demeanor, noting that judging by his pulse, he probably has just enough energy left to speak 3 more sentences. He needed to ensure his actions mattered, as she intended to deliver his last words to the Duke. He lifted his hand to gently touch her cheek, his words honest as he spoke to her. He regretted his actions, realizing in the end that his emotions for her had been genuine. His arm struck the floor. Everyone agreed that he made his exit like a true legend. They all understood he probably wouldn't really die, but imagined that if he did, it would have been an unforgettable moment. Despite this, Payment refused to accept it. In her mind, Bastard hadn't earned the right to simply die after offering such an apology, not considering all his past actions. Determined, she called out his name and confronted him. He refused to accept his apology, believing he deserved to live and face the consequences for all he had done. Moon drifted aimlessly in the heart of the emptiness, her senses spinning as a wave of warmth washed over her. Despite their efforts to make the right decisions, there was no escaping death. He preferred this over simply living out the events of the game, since now he had control over how everything would conclude for him. Suddenly, an unusual dark force emerged next to the sky. The panel takes shape, featuring him within its frame. Display revealed a detailed chart tracking advancements in arrogance, envy, greed, shamelessness, and laziness, all of which appeared to be linked to the theme of the 7 deadly sins. His statistics showed a drastic decrease of 90% in gluttony, an almost complete decline of 99% in envy, and a halfway reduction of 50% in arrogance. Several pages within the book turned themselves. The situation was not resolved, and the mysterious entity encouraged him to continue making efforts for the time being. He wondered aloud about why the cursed book had failed to appear until after his death. He suddenly notices the sound of emerging from inside. The setting transitions to the underground sewers. Ashes floated through the dark tunnels below ground, and it became clear that Campbell had not been the intended victim of the recent murder. Without warning, a voice demanded to know what she believed she had done to his son. The father appeared on the scene, exuding an unmistakable aura of courage and strength, much like a true Lionheart. The assassin immediately begins to tremble uncontrollably. Father, maintaining a calm demeanor, remarked that he had not anticipated anyone coming to his home. He pointed out that the girl had not been invited, questioning her reason for being there. He insisted that she explain herself immediately and demanded to know what she had done to his son. Normally, the man showed kindness, but in this moment he seemed almost feral. Reflecting on the situation, it was likely that the protagonist felt some satisfaction at having trained his aura in a way reminiscent of Sung before his demise. The scene shifted back to the bedroom, where Anne had taken a seat right beside him. This was the very same Anne who had recently revealed herself to be a threat. As he opened his eyes, he found her standing beside him. The visitors were inquiring about the young master's health, hoping he was recovering. She wonders aloud whether he might require medical attention, but as he attempts to stand, interrupts with a request to use the restroom. A sharp ache suddenly grips his chest. He lands gently on the plush bedding. He offers an apology and explains that an odd weakness has taken over his legs. Now caution was necessary for him. He could allow himself to show her some kindness, but he knew she was completely untrustworthy. She explains to him that he requested her help in looking after him. For the foreseeable future, she would remain nearby, a fact that everyone needed to be aware of. She announced her intention to assist him with his bath, and without hesitation, began reaching for his clothing. He urges her to relax, explaining that he has only recently begun to feel well again. She agrees to let him handle things on his own. Despite everything, she goes ahead and lifts him, carrying him into the bathroom. He ordered her to leave, explaining that he had things he needed to handle on his own. Short time passed, and they found themselves back inside the room. Shortly after, she informed him that he had been asleep for an entire 3 days. Princess Payment had personally entrusted her with the responsibility of caring for him. The young man had come dangerously close to death, having lost a significant amount of blood and enduring an extended period without oxygen. Was able to work some magic that kept him alive, giving him a stroke of luck. Upon hearing this, he comes to the conclusion that she most likely kept quiet about what happened with the potion, and recalled that the princess had brought up something significant. He went on to explain that the entire assassination scheme had been exposed. His father had managed to seize one of the assailants and forced a confession through torture. Current issue was that they still needed to offer some sort of apology to the king, since his daughter had been placed at risk within the boundaries of their own estate. Strangely, he faced no consequences for his actions whatsoever. According to the rumors, Princess spoke to the king in a way that resulted in his pardon. The entire exchange, which was originally spread across numerous lengthy speech bubbles, had been condensed into this brief summary. The storyteller couldn't help but notice how the narrative often became overly elaborate. He let himself fall onto the bed, a wave of relief washing over him. After everything, he realized that the outcome wasn't as bad as he had feared, and wasted no time moving in closer, her curiosity piqued by the tension on his face. She wondered aloud what could have caused such unease, questioning if something significant had occurred between him and the princess while they were alone together. He quickly rejects the idea, recalling her earlier wish for something warm. Everyone insisted that he would never dare attempt anything so audacious, convinced that such a move would only result in him being utterly destroyed. She continues laughing, unable to stop. He was encouraged to take the medicine before it cooled down. The moment the drink touches his lips, the unpleasant flavor of PGAG made it difficult for anyone to enjoy. He wonders aloud, perplexed by the mysterious substance before him. She tells him that the liquid is meant to aid his recovery and restore his blood. Scene shifts to 3 maids gathered just outside the doorway, quietly discussing among themselves. They recall how in the past, whenever their master tasted something sour, it often led to him punishing everyone around. However, they notice that his behavior seems unusually different today. Uncertain about what to do, the maids begin to consider whether they ought to inform the madam about this odd change. He simply instructed the 3 to remain where they were and to keep silent. The substance turned out to be nothing more than ordinary medicine. At that moment, he forcefully pushes the entire object into place right then and there. The maids gently shut the door behind them, feeling a bit uneasy as they did so. He remained seated, a puzzled expression spreading across his face. Without warning, he regurgitates everything. It appeared as though he had thrown up pure crude oil. The most troubling part was that he still needed to swallow that concoction twice more if he hoped to make a complete recovery, and nonchalantly offers to prepare pancakes and a bit of tea for him if he's interested. He passed him a piece of cake, prompting him to express his gratitude and remark on her kindness. He even thought she should get a raise for being so thoughtful. He raised her skirt just a little in acknowledgement, expressing gratitude for the kind words before excusing herself to attend to her remaining duties. As she prepared to leave, she mentioned that he should look at the nightstand where she had left a letter addressed to him. Without warning, he raised his voice to get her attention. She requested that the other person hold on for a moment. Earlier, she had brought up the fact that he had already endured the bitterness of that medicine on 4 separate occasions. It seemed impossible, considering that every time the food reached his lips, he would immediately become sick. She responded with composure, placing sugar on her tongue before transferring it gently to him. For a brief moment, he allows himself to unwind. A realization gradually dawns on him as the picture becomes clear in his mind. He takes a moment to absorb and understand the events that just unfolded. He buried his face in his pillow and let out a muffled scream. In reality, he was stretched out comfortably on the bed, secretly imagining that if an experience like that ever happened with his older sister figure, maybe life wouldn't be so terrible after all. However, a sudden memory flashes through his mind. Received a kiss as well. At that moment, he reaches out to take hold of the letter. She now regarded him as only half a man. He feels a wave of relief wash over him, letting out a quiet sigh. Fortunately, the group managed to steer clear of any criminal trouble. After some time had passed, his mother felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over her, grateful that he had survived even though the situation had become so perilous. He brushes off the situation, insisting that it wasn't a big deal. He instructs him to check his reflection, pointing out the gaping wound in his chest. Despite the serious injury, he merely dismisses her concern, insisting that it is nothing more than a minor wound. To him, surviving is all that matters. His father nodded in agreement, remarking that such a scar was more of a badge of honor. He explained that it was because of his son's bravery in rescuing the princess that everyone was spared from what could have been a catastrophe. Reflecting on the situation, it became clear that ordinary maids simply did not exist in this world. Even the maid currently at his side appeared more like a formidable giant than a typical servant. Moon expresses his desire to learn every detail about what occurred. His father revealed that the 3 assassins had been caught. It hadn't been easy to make them reveal anything, but at last, some details came to light. Surprisingly, they were not elite fighters or expert murderers. Instead, they were devotees of a mysterious figure known as the Withering King. Moon felt a wave of confusion, unable to recall ever hearing that name in the original story. The boy's father reveals that he is actually an ancient deity of darkness who has caused endless suffering throughout history. He goes on to describe how, for the right amount, his devoted followers will accept any task, even committing the unthinkable act of murdering their own families. Father reassures his son, explaining that there is no need for concern. He has already issued instructions to ensure that those individuals will be eliminated entirely. The main character stood in shock, as his mother gently reminded him that his father had attained his present rank thanks to his achievements in the military. Confident as ever, the young man expresses his pride in being his father's son, a sentiment that is fully justified. Yet, his main concern shifts to whether they have uncovered the real mastermind responsible for everything. Despite his plea, the boy's father refused, explaining that every hunter who had been taken was trapped under a mysterious curse. As soon as anyone attempted to speak the individual's name, they were immediately consumed by fire and perished on the spot. The entire black market vanished without a trace, leaving investigators with no concrete proof behind. Moon thought it was fascinating that his father had taken down the black market, especially because the same event had occurred in the original novel. Within the tale, his most cherished companion was slain. The question arose, cherished for what purpose? Enraged by this loss, the father commanded the royal knights to act, and as a result, the entire city was reduced to ashes. For 3 long months, the violence continued without pause, staining even the underground sewers with blood. This time, the situation resolved far faster than before. However, for Ariel, this moment marked a significant turning point in her journey. It represented a crucial period of personal growth for her. It was a classic scenario for a main character. She faced wave after wave of opponents, and with each victory, her energy transformed and grew stronger. However, the plans were suddenly cancelled, all because he had granted the maid a 2-day leave. As the night wore on, everyone in the house urged him to take a break and get some sleep. Despite their advice, he found himself unable to rest, since the events around him kept spiraling out of control. The most troubling aspect for him was that with every new change, he found it harder to depend on the events that the original book had promised would unfold. He had devised an intricate strategy. He needed to stay alive, avoid the horrifying fate of being restrained and harmed, become more powerful, and most importantly, he had to stop relying on the book. He pauses to reflect, and after a moment he confesses his thoughts. The situation seemed illogical to the observer. He realized he needed to act with much greater care, since the reality was that he remained uncertain about the true identity of the individual he had seen in his vision. The figure didn't resemble Ariel, nor did it look like. This left a burning question, just who could it possibly be? He collapsed onto the bed, accepting that dwelling on it any longer would be useless. At this moment, focusing on self-improvement mattered most. Being the Duke's son granted him access to countless resources for gaining influence, but he found every method disappointingly ordinary. Make matters even more frustrating, the body's previous owner had attended a renowned academy for a whole year, yet all she gained from the experience was a useless spell that transformed trash into light. Despite everything, everyone knew he was the child of an influential man, so it seemed impossible for him to be completely lacking in skill. Surely he couldn't be that powerless. Despite his efforts, he remains aware that matching the skills of the protagonist's team is impossible for him. In this realm, she holds the title of one blessed by the gods, her status far beyond what any ordinary individual could hope to attain. Served as a clear illustration, after obtaining a powerful blessing from a distant, unfeeling goddess, her abilities had only continued to increase without end. Such a level of sacred strength was not something that could be surpassed by hard work alone. Ariel found herself unexpectedly favored by an astonishing number of breathtakingly beautiful elemental spirits, over 10 in total. Despite this rare blessing, her circumstances still felt utterly unfortunate. He found himself trapped in a miserable situation. Despite all his efforts and training, he realized there was no chance he could ever outdo someone of her caliber. He refused to remain passive, knowing he had to prepare himself. His priority was building enough strength to protect himself, particularly in case Ariel turned against him one day. Looking at the positive aspects, it appeared that he could potentially discover new abilities. Before he could finish, he began to snap his fingers. As the fingers moved, a black book materialized. She strikes him directly in the groin. He shouted in frustration, demanding that the troublesome thing quit appearing and striking him again and again. He suddenly notices an odd whistling noise. The book sprang open, and its pages began to turn on their own. Over the past several days, it began recounting every event that had occurred. He felt irritated by how overly specific the report was. Its wording painted him as a suspicious figure, as if he were plotting something terrible against the unfortunate girl. At that moment, he becomes aware of something unusual. The word assassin appeared in the text, standing out as it glowed with a bright red light. Without warning, an unusual force enveloped him, causing him to shout as the night drew to a close. She wished that a warning would be given before opening the book next time. He suddenly realizes he is standing inside a different room. He glanced around, quickly noticing that this dungeon felt different from the one he had explored earlier. It occurred to him that he might have entered another area hidden within the book. Before he has a chance to understand what is happening, a figure comes up behind him. He spun around and saw that she had appeared once more. It was the very girl who had previously struck him on the neck. Without warning, everything happened so fast that there was no chance to respond before darkness swallowed the scene. He found himself waking up in his bed once more. The unfortunate man had no time to grasp what had occurred before he was knocked down with a single blow. The book moved once more. Upon checking, he noticed that his dagger combat ability had increased to 1%, while his shadow step technique remained at 0.5%. At last, he realized the real fighting skills he possessed in this chaotic world. He felt a surge of excitement, as he confidently believed that his new trick would turn out to be exceptionally powerful. Later that night, he found himself. He rested on his bed, quietly muttering to himself about his narrow escape from danger. It seemed that his time inside had barely reached 3 seconds. He checked his proficiency levels, and noticed they had both increased by 1%. He finally realized just how overpowered his abilities were. Whenever he defeated an opponent, their skills would appear in his book, allowing him to study and master them himself. Perhaps it was only abilities that caught his attention, though he couldn't say for certain. If vision played a role, he should have already acquired the ice power the girl used. However, that might not be the case, since her ability originated from a goddess. All he could tell was that his mind was focused on a powerful ability at that moment, and he recognized just how formidable it was. He buzzed with anticipation, convinced that soon he would possess both the power and the skills with daggers. Although he wasn't sure yet how to quickly master these abilities, he was determined to discover the way. Book flies through the air and strikes him squarely on the face. Suddenly, he is struck in the head by a powerful kick. Sharp blow sliced across the character's chest. The result is that it gets torn to pieces. At the same time, just beyond his door, Anne rapped her knuckles against the wood and called out his name, hoping to get his attention. As she entered the room, she notices him hiding beneath the blankets, a puzzled expression spreading across her face. Observing the scene, she let out a soft laugh, finding it amusing. She noticed that he continued to sleep in exactly the same position as he had during his childhood. To her, he seemed just as adorable as he was when he was a little boy. He cast a spell to keep the warmth in place, deciding to let him sleep a little longer before disturbing his rest. Narrator observed that it seemed only a matter of time before the character revealed a darker side, suspecting that her innocent smile hid a far less friendly nature. The moment she shuts the door, he emerges from beneath the blanket. He complained under his breath about the cursed book, striking him directly in the groin. Perhaps he was simply falling victim to a few underhanded tactics. No matter what, he remained resolved to return to that dream again and again, refusing to stop until he finally defeated her. By the time the sun has climbed above the horizon, the day has already begun. He had already made 185 attempts, showing extraordinary mental toughness. Even though he met his end with each try, he now managed to survive for half a minute. A sudden wave of tiredness crashes over him, jolting his body and leaving him drained. He aimed for his tea, but ended up sending it tumbling to the ground. She collapses onto the floor, her energy utterly spent. At last, he discovered a method to become more powerful. The main issue was that experiencing death within the illusion brought pain that seemed just as intense as in real life. He believed he could outsmart the rules, imagining that when death came for him, he would simply slip back in and brush aside his terror. However, he quickly discovered that such an escape was out of reach. After spending the entire night working hard, it was finally time to discover whether all that dedication had paid off. His skill with the dagger had advanced to the 2nd level, while his progress in Shadow Step had climbed to 11%. Though his abilities were far from matching those of an assassin, simply realizing he had the potential to grow in this way was already incredibly significant to him. He looked forward to trying it for the first time, anticipation evident in his expression. He triggered his Shadow Step ability, swiftly moving across the room in a blur. The young man moved with such excitement that it seemed as if he was leaving trails of smoke behind him. Without warning, he flinched as a sharp pain shot through him. It became clear that his foot had been burned. He found himself puzzled, trying to figure out how the assassin who had gone after had used this ability without showing any sign of pain. Suddenly, understanding dawned on him. Techniques on display far surpassed what someone of his level, merely a Tier 1 fighter, could handle. During his time at the academy, he had been taught that using such advanced moves required spreading through every part of his body, both to strengthen himself and to lessen the backlash. Only warriors who had reached level 2 possessed the ability to do that. For now, the plan was to search for a suitable instructor, ideally someone attractive. He was already lost in thoughts about Saint Maria, the renowned figure from the academy. The main problem he faced was that, although he was acquainted with plenty of skilled magic users, he barely knew any formidable fighters. The reason for this was that in his world, magic was so overwhelmingly strong that hardly anyone chose to learn physical combat. Whenever White Train tried to rely on punches or kicks, he would end up getting blasted by a fireball instead. In that moment, realization struck. There existed a single fighter, undeniably the strongest character in the entire tale. The person in question was his father. Couldn't believe he had overlooked the fact that the most formidable opponent was under the same roof. Over the past century, no fighter had shaped the world more profoundly than this man. At the age of 15, he had already earned a place among the royal guards. When he turned 20, he led successful campaigns against rebellious factions. By 27, his accomplishments elevated him to the rank of marshal within the empire. At the age of 32, he claimed the title of Lionheart King. Throughout his life, he had never tasted defeat in battle. Everyone recognized that he was truly exceptional. The boy's thoughts shifted, and he started to believe that Moon might have truly earned his unfortunate fate. Moon once possessed it all, a flawless life, along with a father who could have guided him through anything. Yet Moon managed to lose it all through his own actions. Although things had turned out this way, he decided that from this moment forward, he would request private training sessions from his father. While it might seem likely that his father would decline, the reality was quite the opposite. And knocked on the door once more to inform him that the master was seeking his presence. He leaves alongside her, remarking that the timing couldn't be better, as he had been on the verge of making the very same request. As he steps outside, he encounters two additional maids. Among them is a girl with glasses who appears to be the first slender character introduced so far. Moon observes that the others refer to Anne with a word, beginning with the letter H. The now in a higher position received a compliment, suggesting she must have recently earned a promotion. He shares that the former head maid quit immediately after he regained consciousness, which led to her being promoted to the role. He wonders if she was forced to leave because of something he did, leaving him puzzled by the situation. She reassured him that despite stepping down from her role, as she would remain a member of the household. That moment, his mother embraces him in an unusually strange way. The narrator suggests to the illustrator that the scene could use a little moderation. During the hug, she tells him she wants to hear him call her mommy again and again, 1,000 times. She gently guides his head to rest against her abdomen, urging him to pay attention. It turned out that she was expecting a baby, so he would soon have a younger sibling. At that moment, her father entered the room and gently advised her to relax. The boy had only recently gotten out of bed after his recovery, so it was best not to become overly enthusiastic. Some time passed before Moon discovered, much to his astonishment, that his father would be returning to the battlefield. The maid positioned beside his father stood out due to her imposing height. It was obvious the Duke had personally selected the female staff, making his preferences quite clear. His choices hinted at a sophisticated sense of style. That afternoon, he announces his plans to head back to the front lines, explaining that he will be away for no less than a month. While he is gone, Moon must remain in the capital. He then faces Miss, expressing his trust in her to care for the group during his absence. On the other hand, advises against him leaving, pointing out that the Empire has plenty of other generals, and reminding him of his status as a duke. His father shared that, regrettably, after almost 10 years without news, the situation had become critical. Evidence of abyssal demons had begun to appear close to the borders. Moon understood the true purpose behind the situation. It was merely a tactic designed to scatter the human defenders. True invasion would not occur for another 3 years, marking the moment when Ariel would ultimately emerge as the hero. Although his father claimed he would only be away for a month, it was likely he would actually be gone for 3 years. Moo's hopes of studying swordsmanship under him had been completely dashed. The Griffin pulls a carriage up to the scene. Father raised his hand in farewell, reassuring his wife that she shouldn't shed any tears, promising her he would return before long. He motioned for Moon to come closer and informed her that he had agreed to join. When he put his own safety on the line to shield the Empress, he displayed the fearless spirit expected of a true knight, an unwavering bravery that was part of the Camel family's legacy. The image triggers memories of his family's emblem in his mind. The sword stands for their power, showing that they serve as the Empire's cutting edge. Meanwhile, the dragon stands for the foes they are destined to conquer. Altogether, this means they are considered the ultimate weapon for their whole kingdom. There comes a time when each male in the family faces his own fight. Moon's future remains uncertain, and whether he chooses that road is unknown. However, the important thing is that Moon has proven his maturity. For this reason, his father vows to provide all the support and opportunities he lacked growing up, determined to help Moon grow even more powerful. Moon remains motionless for a brief period, enveloped in silence, before his father announces that they need to discuss an important matter. His father expresses a desire to hear Moon's honest thoughts regarding Anne. Moon, taken by surprise, comments that the girl is friendly, though he wonders aloud about the reason for mentioning it. Moon's father told him that he had seen the girl mature over the years. He pointed out that she belonged to a respectable family, was intelligent, and above all, viewed Moon as more than simply her superior. The father warned that if Moon didn't act quickly, he might lose her. Moon now stood in shock, completely confused by his father's words and unsure what he meant. The Duke chooses to speak honestly, stating that the family requires more heirs. His wife is only now expecting their second child, and since he must soon return to the battlefield, there will be no opportunity to have additional children. Mu, feeling uneasy, brings up the fact that he is officially promised to. His father dismisses Mu's concern, explaining that the engagement is only for political reasons. He adds that even if Mu and eventually wed, will assume the role of main wife while Anne would be considered a secondary wife. That moment, Moon's father's expression shifted to one of stern resolve. He stated his decision clearly. In 3 years, when he came back, Moon must have a child. That was the entire plan, simple and unwavering. Moon couldn't help but wonder what sort of unfeeling father would push Anne toward him in such a way. It would definitely avoid being in that situation, feeling strongly that it was not something they'd ever choose. Once the father exited the room, Anne entered and mentioned that she had overheard her name being spoken. She then asked if there was anything he required from her. At first, the narrator expected Moon to avoid answering, but instead, Moon addressed the issue directly and stated that they should have a child. He simply followed his father's recent instructions. He believed it was nothing more than a harmless jest, so she felt no obligation to pay it any mind. For now, her responsibility was simply to serve as a maid, and eventually, their paths would separate as they moved on with their own lives. Without warning, he began to praise her, insisting she was an ideal woman and expressing confidence that she would eventually meet someone wonderful. He told her that if she ever started dating someone, she only needed to let him know face to face. At that point, he would happily allow her to move on. With unwavering confidence, he rested his hand on her shoulder, encouraging her to summon her courage and seek out her own happiness. At the same time, he leaves the scene with a confident stride, convinced that he executed his plan flawlessly. Yet the question remains, does he truly like her? All signs seem to point that way. As anticipated, she was clearly unsettled by what happened. He trembles with anger, her teeth tightly pressed together as she mutters that he truly is not the person he once was. She realized she could no longer delay. Tonight would have to be the night. He had finally arrived at their destination that evening. The boy lay there, his mind filled with thoughts of how his plans had unraveled. He had hoped his father would guide him to become stronger, but now his father was no longer around. Left on his own, he realized he would have to find his own path forward. Present, he steers clear of the academy because so many of its students have ties to the influential main character, and getting involved would only complicate things for him. Right now, his focus is on perfecting the fundamentals. Once he has a solid foundation, he'll be ready to venture beyond and face the world. He shuts one book and reaches for another. The mysterious book bound in black. When he opens the book, he discovers that it contains a detailed history of everything he had read in the previous volumes. In fact, simply glancing at the cover and skimming through a handful of pages is enough for him to grasp all the information inside. The small book offered an excellent way for anyone to improve quickly. At that exact moment, Anne entered the room, feigning innocence as she reminded others to be mindful of what they were reading. He ignores her presence and inquires whether she has brought any food for him. She agreed without hesitation. He warned her to be gentle with him, yet she reminded him that fulfilling this responsibility was simply part of her job. She arrived carrying a rare bottle of vintage wine, a luxury with just 100 bottles made annually, and a price tag exceeding 200,000 coins. He explained that he wasn't feeling up to it, choosing instead to focus on his studies and avoid any distractions. The bottle threatened to shatter under the pressure of her hand as she looked at him, wondering what drink he preferred. He explains that he needs coffee to remain alert and concentrate, but she informs him that their only options are wine or black tea. The words triggered a sense of within them, as if they had heard something like this before. He stopped for a moment, realizing that the situation reminded him of something he had experienced before. She passed the cup to him with an apology, explaining that rats had gotten into the coffee beans, but promised to bring new ones the following day. He didn't even glance at the cup before bringing it to his lips and drinking, completely unaware of what he was doing. A sudden jolt of surprise washes over them. The cup slipped from someone's grasp and shattered when it hit the floor. His eyesight began to fade, the world around him losing its sharpness. He began to fall to the ground, his voice trembling with confusion as he questioned the reason behind her betrayal. She reached out with a soft grip and assured him that she could never bring herself to do something like that. She gently urges him to rest without worry. Her heart felt completely broken and her feelings for him ran deep. She couldn't understand how he could say such hurtful things. He seemed like a different person now. In her mind, only her love could cleanse him. He had no choice but to accept this, because she believed they were destined to be together for all eternity, no matter what happened to the world. He slowly blinks awake, uncertain of his surroundings. Their hands and feet were already secured tightly against the board. The girl from the prophecy stood directly before him. The weight of the prophecy's curse pressed down on him yet again. Without hesitation, she began removing her uniform, muttering that the notorious black market dealer always delivered on his promises. He attempts to question her actions, but she instantly insists that he is fully aware of her intentions. She recalled how, a decade earlier when he was only 8 years old, she had remained steadfastly by his side. From that day forward, her life revolved around supporting him. In exchange, he now lived for her sake. At this point, it became her responsibility to guide him back onto the proper course and help him heal. Moon claimed ignorance of her accusations and pleaded for his release. She simply silences him, signaling that he should remain quiet, assuring him through her actions that she will handle the situation on her own. He wanted to connect with her completely, both physically and spiritually, uniting every part of himself, body, soul, and every fiber of his being. Each lock of hair and every bit of blood would become hers. He no longer needed to stress about gaining his father's approval, since she had already managed to win it over herself. The narrator had anticipated a surprise, perhaps an interruption that would change everything, but nothing of the sort happened. Instead, the young man simply woke up the following morning, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and his entire demeanor showing how worn out he felt. The cycle repeated often, losing awareness, suddenly coming to in the midst of confusion, fading out again, and eventually regaining consciousness once more. He found it impossible to accept the truth. The person responsible for destroying Moon's spirit and the one who had trapped him in chains was none other than Anne. He claims that she knocked him down with just one blow, and despite bracing himself for the impact, the pain was still overwhelming. He pleaded with her to end the chaos, release him from the handcuffs, and allow him an opportunity to get away. She firmly refused, making it clear there was no possibility. In contrast to the countless years she had waited, the ache she felt now seemed insignificant. Character silently pleaded for divine patience, feeling as though the author was dangerously close to crossing a line. Bewildered by the unfolding chaos, the character found themselves at a loss for words, unable to process the absurdity before them. Despite his outward display of pain, he was merely faking it. He acknowledges to himself how incredible the feeling was. Despite that, he realizes that if things continue this way, she will eventually end his life. He urgently needed to find a way out, but heavy steel cuffs, secured tightly to the wall, kept him trapped. At Limedick, she merely inquires about his actions, wanting to know what he believes he's doing. He explained that his wrists ached, and he simply needed to stretch them for some relief. She believed it was already past the point of change, feeling helpless to take any action. He admits to herself that she will miss him terribly, but she knows she must stay behind to handle responsibilities at the mansion. If she neglects her duties, she worries that others could grow suspicious. He also considered whether it might be easier to eliminate everyone else in the house, since he was hers now. A sudden interruption jolts him back to reality. Panic surged through him as he pleaded desperately, hoping she would reconsider her actions. Before she finishes putting on her clothes, she wonders aloud if there is any maid here that he likes, silently hoping that isn't the one. He insisted that she must be imagining things, assuring her that there was no involvement with anyone else. She let out a playful laugh and reassured him to relax, explaining that she was only joking. She assured him that, provided he acted properly, no one in the house would be harmed by her unless it became absolutely necessary. He pleads for his freedom, unable to believe she truly intends to imprison him in this place for eternity. Without warning, the enchanted locks sprang open as she snapped her fingers. She warns him against doing anything reckless. The center of this room stood an enclosed area, its walls strengthened with steel sourced from a mysterious, unknown tower. In other words, escaping from this place would be nearly unthinkable. He wondered aloud whether anyone would think it was strange, but she reassured him. She had already informed everyone that, inspired by his father's words about gaining strength, Mew had chosen to go back to the academy. No one would notice his absence for some time. She promised him that everything would be taken care of just as before. She would deliver his meals 3 times a day, maintaining the routine she had always followed. Trust in her came easily. After all, she had managed this for years. In a sudden burst of energy, she managed to strike with perfect precision. The boys were clearly suffering. He had truly crossed the line now, stepping into territory few would ever dare. It seemed impossible to imagine anyone willingly embracing such madness. She raised her hand in a gentle farewell, signaling her departure. He calls out to her in a loud voice. Suddenly, the door closed with a loud bang. He had never imagined that, of all the people spoken of in the prophecy, she would be the one. Whenever he complained about what happened, he would immediately admit how satisfying it had been. He couldn't hide that truth from himself. Yet deep down, he realized that if things continued this way, he probably wouldn't make it out unscathed. Despite her reference to a mysterious magical sealant, he remains determined to test the door himself. Summoning all his strength, he seizes the handle and gives it a powerful tug. However, pain overwhelms him, and he collapses forward in torment. The room consisted entirely of solid steel, strengthened further with enchantments, leaving no possible escape. At last, the book makes its appearance. This time, she managed to restrain herself and kept her hand from striking his face. Yu admitted bluntly that he stood no chance, recognizing that this woman possessed as much influence and promise as the concept of payment itself. Despite any efforts to begin training immediately, he would never become strong enough to survive before meeting his end. The book remains open before him, and he realizes there's no reason to close it. Deciding he has nothing else to occupy his time, he chooses to practice rather than waste time feeling sorry for himself. However, something suddenly made them pause. When he flips open the book, it dawns on him that the story he read the previous night contained an equation that matched this very scenario. In the following chapter, he had already managed to complete nearly 200 push-ups, reaching a count between 199 and 200. Despite everything that happened during the actual night, his body managed to endure. At first had been the cause, now Anne had become the latest, Confusion swirled around the strange events affecting him. The pain itself didn't bother him much. What truly bothered him was his helplessness. Time and again he found himself outmatched, never the one in control. He silently vowed that, in the future, he would be the one to defeat her. That idea had scarcely taken shape in his mind. He arrived with a cheerful smile, announcing that the day's tasks had come to an end. Un found that talking was simple, but proving himself through action was another matter. Meanwhile, she, with her charming demeanor, commented that returning home made her feel like a wife after a tiring day. She acted as if this was entirely ordinary, her cuteness shining through in the way she accepted the situation. She had delivered his meal and carefully prepared a bath, making sure the water was just right. Narrator sighed inwardly, struggling to find the words to explain the situation. The girl had inquired whether the boy would prefer to eat, bathe, or perhaps something more suggestive. Meanwhile, the boy, who was far from honest, continued his charade. Despite all the conversation, he made his way directly to the bathroom, lowering himself into the water as if seeking comfort and peace. Based on his expression, it was clear that relaxation was the furthest thing from his mind. He quietly insisted that he was old enough to handle the situation on his own and didn't require anyone's assistance. Silent plea hung in the air for someone to rescue the unfortunate boy before the narrator faced the risk of being banned for continuing to read his story. He states that since his body is now hers, it is her responsibility to look after it. She goes so far as to check his hearing while he is otherwise occupied. Inside his mind, he desperately vowed not to be defeated by this Eander. As dinner approached, he prepared himself for the meal. He expressed his gratitude to her, complimenting the delicious taste of the food. The character picked up the plate and began to eat. He wanted to know what type of meat was being served, and she responded without hesitation. Response reveals that the item comes from a rare giant bull with 3 horns. He had prepared it just for him, aware that it was reputed to boost one's physical abilities. He warned her not to make that dish for him anymore, but she only gave a sly smile and revealed that he had unknowingly eaten it many times before. For a while, she had been secretly adding it to his meals. He rose to his feet, expressing his exhaustion with the situation. He remained confined in darkness, never permitted to glimpse the sun, while she brought him strange meals he didn't recognize. If she delayed his release any longer, he would tumble back down once more. The man lay unconscious, completely out of it. Others around him felt sympathy, thinking there was nothing anyone could do to help in that moment. The meal had fallen under a curse yet again. She quietly encourages him to savor the moment, hinting that the night ahead will last a long time. When he blinks awake, he finds that it is. It was obvious that the man had been completely devastated. She expressed regret for her actions the previous night, explaining that fear for his safety had made her gentler with him this time. The towering opponent, despite his bold claims about dominating the match, found himself completely overpowered and defeated once more. She attempts to start a conversation with him, yet he acts as if she isn't there, giving her no response at all. She mentions that because he has behaved well for the past 2 days. He decided to fulfill a single wish for him. He quickly requested to be set free, but she firmly insisting it couldn't be done. When he pleaded for a change of clothes, she once again refused, telling him that was out of the question as well. Character seemed confused, wondering what the point of making a wish was if there were so many restrictions on what could be requested. She mentions that, at this moment, the most significant wish she is able to grant is as simple as allowing him to decide his meal time for the following day. On the website where the story was posted, several commenters remarked that the main character seemed to be enduring more than anyone should, even joking that they'd happily swap lives with him if it would ease his burden. Faced with this, the protagonist let out a weary sigh and acknowledged that, in the end, having the simple choice of what to eat was still preferable to having no choices at all. He remembers what this season was like in the past. He once took pleasure in savoring unique wines that matched each season, along with certain kinds of rare fish. He explains that the fish he refers to is sourced from lake, a location that is quite distant. He exaggerated, claiming that he once lived life as a carefree soul. Found herself unable to choose a meal, her options feeling limited by the confines of her situation. He wondered what the purpose of living could be if even catching a small fish from lake was impossible for him. She spoke his name aloud, then with a sigh of resignation agreed to retrieve it on his behalf. Without hesitation, he reaches out and takes hold of her arm, expressing his gratitude with genuine appreciation. The man began sending heart emojis, claiming he was in pain, though his sincerity seemed questionable. He wished the woman a wonderful day at her job and mentioned that he would be at home, anticipating her return. She freezes in place, overwhelmed by embarrassment. Without warning, she rushed over, pressed a quick kiss to his lips, and he remained frozen in place, completely shocked by what had just happened. At this moment, there was uncertainty about the true intentions behind his actions. Perhaps he was orchestrating an elaborate plan to confuse the villain's mind. As she prepared to depart, she informed him that reaching Lake would take until the following afternoon, advising him to get some rest before the long journey ahead. As soon as she stepped outside, she struggled to maintain her composure, quietly admitting to herself that she had nearly lost control. She believed the young master was the most adorable person she had ever known, and her excitement grew as she hurried to deliver the fish, eager for another chance to indulge him. As he considered the possibility that he might at last enjoy some tranquility and sleep through the night, hope flickered within him. He decides it's the perfect moment to take out his most cherished possession, the book. They realized they needed to spend more time practicing in the virtual training rooms. He appeared to be requesting access to a simulation known as the Space of 1,000 Locks. He had learned this method from a book he studied to improve his skill at breaking magical seals. At the same time, beneath the stormy, battered sky. As a storm raged, a concerned person cautioned a particular girl about the perilous state of lake, urging her to stay away from the water. The individual extended their hand in an attempt to take hold of hers. She calls upon an ability. She drives a blade into his hand. No one except the young master was permitted to approach her, and if he dared to interfere once more, she threatened to toss him to the fish. The elderly man muttered under his breath, declaring that he wouldn't interfere if the eccentric woman chose to risk her life. She ought to be aware that the master of lake had awakened. The guild had kept a close eye on the situation and the news. They had determined that it was a creature of monarch class, and raised her hands, realizing the strange weather finally made sense to her. The boatman grumbled under his breath, insisting she owed him 300 coins, especially now that he had to tend to his hurt hand. But more importantly, he warned her not to cross the Adventurers Guild, since they would never let her escape without consequences. A bucket packed with coins rested in the ice beside her. He questioned her once more, wanting to know if she was truly determined to leave. He emphasized the serious risks involved, making it clear that she didn't fully comprehend the dangers of opposing the main Adventurers Guild. She responds without emotion, making it clear that none of it matters to her. Those things hold no value in her eyes. Every action she takes is driven by her feelings for someone she loves. The scene shifts to a band of adventurers assembled by the lakeshore. The girl gripped her staff tightly, determined to protect Rod no matter what. She resolved that after this mission, she would finally find the courage to confess her feelings to him. Voice cut through the air, sharply reminding Erica to pay attention and quit letting her mind wander. The healer realized she had to use her powers immediately, or the group wouldn't be able to endure for much longer. She began to draw upon her magical energy. One of the adventurers shouted a warning to the others that the creature was approaching. After withstanding countless special attacks, the beast was finally on the verge of showing itself. At that moment, a massive shark burst out of the lake. Clearly, the creature ruling over the lake was to blame. A huge sphere of water began to form as the creature gathered its energy. Someone in the crowd shouted out for Rod. She summoned the power of the earth, raising a protective wall from the ground. He shouts at the mage, urging him to cast his spell. She began channeling magical energy through her staff. It became clear that she possessed the rare abilities of both a healer and a mage, demonstrating impressive versatility. Right before her spell touches down, sudden eruption shakes the air as another blast detonates nearby. She signaled to Ra, urging him to rush forward. He seizes the moment and dashes forward. The creature takes a powerful blow as a sharp strike connects directly with its head. The impact causes the whole lake to erupt in a violent explosion. He felt drained of energy, yet he continued onward. Despite everything, he somehow spun around and gave a thumbs up to signal that the task was complete. The observer couldn't help but notice how this team was expertly assembled, featuring a formidable mage and a healer committed to supporting the group. The mage, appearing pleased, adjusted her hair with a grateful smile. Erica sat quietly, a sense of uselessness washing over her as she wondered if she had made any difference at all. Rod and exchanged words of praise, both expressing how enjoyable it was to embark on adventures together. At the same time, Erica searched within herself for answers. Years ago, she had vowed as a child that she and Rod would always stick together. Despite her dedication and the effort she poured into their relationship, it seemed to her that Rod barely noticed her these days. He had once been the first to stand by him, but now she lingered in the background, offering quiet support as his attention shifted toward another. Continued tending to his patient's wounds when, without warning, Ron called out in Erica's direction. He urged her to regain focus and assist with the dissection of the lake monster. Suddenly, an uneasy sensation creeps in, hinting that something is not quite right. Peculiar noise catches their attention. The water surface turns cloudy once more, and then a sudden explosion of water shot high above, piercing the air with its force. The entire group instinctively lowered their heads at once. A new creature began to emerge from the lake, distinct from those seen before. Unlike the others, this one appeared to be genuine and far more formidable. Swiftly began to weave the incantation for a powerful third-tier spell, channeling her energy with impressive speed. The spell struck the creature's neck with force, yet it had no effect at all. The creature responded by unleashing a fierce storm of lightning from its horn. A bolt of lightning split the sky apart. Erica quickly reached for Ron, tugging him aside just in time while urgently warning him to watch out. He urges her to step aside, knowing that this creature is far more dangerous than anything they can handle. She wondered aloud about his next move, prompting him to declare his intention to protect. He explained that since he was the one who invited her to join the group, it was his duty to look after her. He was willing to face death itself as long as he could remain with her. Certainly wished she hadn't heard that information. Rod rushed ahead, unaware that a silent observer watched the chaos from afar. And, naturally intrigued, looked forward to experiencing the might of a monarch-level beast up close. He believed that, with such power, dragons could help her obtain the exact ingredient she needed to nourish the young master. Still, she wondered why she was so determined to give him monster meat in the first place. The boss prepared to unleash yet another surge of lightning. Rod realizes the truth. This marks their final moment. At that moment, Anne unleashed a spell that restrained everyone. Sudden flash of lightning streaked down from the clouds, striking the creature with tremendous force. Rod glanced back, and this time the beast began to slip, losing his balance as he tumbled backward into the lake. The assault that had been moments away from being released was now entirely. Someone approached with concern, inquiring about her well-being, and appeared and made it clear to Erica that she should not get involved, insisting that she would be the one to take on the monster herself. With that decisive action, she triggered yet another limitation. Shannon Erica suddenly understands that the woman in front of her is controlling liquid metal. The creature becomes surrounded as sharp objects penetrate its body from all sides, and remained as composed as always. She conjures a sword from thin air while gliding effortlessly toward the beast, as if she were treading on invisible ground. He decided that the creature would face consequences for frightening off the fish she had traveled so far to catch for the young master. In her mind, interfering with her mission meant a sentence of death. With a single, flawless motion, the blade cut through the creature, splitting it perfectly into two separate pieces. The figure retreats, disappearing once more beneath the surface. Rod stood off to the side, unable to find words as he stared in shock. He was stunned that such a powerful, monarch-level creature had been defeated so easily. Clearly, the protagonist still had a long journey ahead if he ever hoped to overcome such challenges. Hurried over to see how Rod was doing, and he assured her that there was nothing to worry about. Struggled, clearly in rough shape. Though he carried a handful of healing potions, he realized they wouldn't suffice to restore him completely. At that moment, he requests that Erica approach the woman and start a conversation with her. He hoped she would discover whether she was truly an adventurer and consider becoming part of their group. After all, someone capable of defeating a monarch beast could be an incredible asset to their team. Anne was occupied near the lake's edge, collecting the remaining fish that had been left behind. The only issue was that she had neglected to find out which ones the young master actually preferred. That moment, Erica approached and informed her that the two mushrooms in her hands were not safe to eat. One gave off a terrible odor when prepared, while the other was extremely poisonous. Erica suggested she choose the pair closer to the front instead, explaining that those were the well-known edible mushrooms from Lake. Anne, unable to hide her curiosity, wonders aloud how Erica possesses that knowledge. In response, Erica reveals that she once lived in the area. She goes on to share that many nobles are fond of those fish, so she would catch them and sell them for profit. In less than 15 minutes of observing and getting ready, she had already mastered what to do and could execute it flawlessly. That moment, Erica wondered aloud if just had traveled such a long distance to catch the fish for someone special to her. Just responded without hesitation, confirming that she had. The only reason for her journey was that the one she cared for had wished for fish. Hearing this, Erica remarked that whoever was loved by Just and received such devotion must be truly fortunate. And hesitated, her thoughts drifting to the ways her affection was acknowledged by others. At that moment, the man lay unconscious in a dimly lit room, and it was clear that, despite the circumstances, he was considered extremely fortunate. Certain that the depth of love was clear, she glanced back before turning to walk away. Called after her, urging her not to leave just yet. He explains that her issue concerns love, and she seeks advice from someone as experienced as the woman before her. And gently placed the fish down, reflecting that love was a complicated issue, one without easy or obvious answers. Because Erica had assisted her in understanding the fish problem, she decided to repay the kindness by offering some helpful advice. Began by using the familiar introduction, mentioning that her friend had liked someone for quite a while. She remains uncertain about whether this individual shares her feelings. Her friend is rather reserved and somewhat innocent, and to complicate matters, someone else has recently entered the scene. Ever since then, he had started showing more kindness to the new girl, which made her consider whether she should just give up. And paid close attention before inquiring about the depth of her friend's feelings for the boy in question. Erica quickly responded, explaining that she wasn't the one involved, but rather her friend was, and stops pretending and demands honesty, telling to speak directly. After a moment of hesitation, confesses the truth. She is the one who has loved him, and those feelings have lasted since their childhood, spanning more than a decade. And fixed her gaze intently on Erica, questioning whether she would be willing to sacrifice her own life for him. In response, Erica declared that her devotion ran even deeper. She would do absolutely anything for him, no matter if the entire world opposed her. Sense of exasperation filled the air as another situation spiraled out of control. Simply nodded in response, choosing to go along with what was happening. It seemed clear that the answer had already been found. Her feelings for him were so powerful that no further questions remained. She understood that she had to listen to her innermost desires and devote herself completely to the person she cared for most. More significantly, she needed to carefully consider her decisions to avoid future regret. As Anne left, remained behind, lost in contemplation as he mentally repeated the advice about following one's heart. Without warning, an unusual fire begins to burn, not in the space surrounding her but deep within her own being. Faint voice lingered in the air, questioning whether she was truly prepared to abandon everything she held dear. Doubt crept in, challenging her resolve and wondering if she would truly submit. The voice urged her to release her grip on her values, to forget about rules and even disregard her own existence. They were willing to give up everything for him. She was determined to keep him close, refusing to let anyone separate them. The world felt like it was on the verge of exploding, far worse than anything described in the tale where those girls lost control. The current situation reached a new level of chaos. The girl now shook with anxiety, whispering under her breath that she might snap if anyone else claimed Rod. The voice responded, expressing satisfaction that realization had dawned. It urged the listener to accept their most hidden wants and take possession of him, but also warned that there was a complication. Rod possessed great strength. Guarantee that he would be hers alone. She believed she must shatter his arms, fasten a collar around his neck, and strip away his dignity until he became nothing but her obedient pet. The demons that existed in this world were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. At the same time, Rod sat close to, almost as if he were silently hoping for her recovery. He looked over at Erica, concerned, and wanted to know if she was all right and what had occurred between her and the other woman. He insists that she's all right, explaining that the woman hadn't harmed her. She was simply delayed after exhausting her mana. The real problem lies in her status as a maid serving a noble house, which means she can't become part of their group. Rod accepted the situation, understanding there was nothing more to be done. He had simply hoped to express his gratitude to her face-to-face. Acknowledged that without the intervention of that woman, none of them would have survived. Went on to mention that she had observed something unusual, a peculiar mark on Erica's chest. Hurriedly conceals the issue and dismisses any concern, insisting that it's nothing serious, most likely a result of the earlier collision or perhaps a trace of magical feedback. She assures everyone that she plans to have it examined at a later time. Rod gently lifted into his arms, agreeing with her assessment that they should look for a place to rest. The pair exchanged gentle glances and playful smiles, their interactions filled with a light, teasing charm. Remained at a distance, quietly observing the scene unfold. Their eyes had turned dark, clearly signaling that something was very wrong. The following morning arrived. The exhausted young man opened his eyes, his appearance disheveled and worn, a clear sign he had likely spent the entire night practicing, especially since she had already gotten a head start. She came back at last, announcing her long-awaited return. Now fully persuaded, she realized he was employing the classic strategy of thinking several steps ahead. He acted as though his longing for her was overwhelming, insisting that being apart from her felt unbearable, to the point that he believed he might not survive without seeing her again. He gently caressed his cheek, observing that he now seemed prepared to surrender himself to her completely, both in body and in spirit. He explained that she was sorry for being late. The journey to Lake had been much longer than she anticipated, as it was quite far away. Despite the delay, she proudly presented the freshest fish, exactly what he had requested. He amazed everyone by expertly making 5 precise cuts on the fish before adding 3 different herbs and placing it directly in the oven. The way she presented the dish looked almost too perfect to be real. He felt a surge of excitement as the delicious aroma filled the air, and without hesitation, he reached forward, eager to get a taste. She imitates the noise of an airplane. She offered him a bite, and after tasting it, he expressed his gratitude. He then suggested that she should sample it as well. He gently refused, explaining that this time was different. She had prepared the dish especially for him. Still, she warned him to eat cautiously, reminding him that fish often contained many small bones. He let out a dismissive laugh and insisted that he wasn't a child. As soon as he begins to eat, he suddenly feels something lodged in his throat. Without hesitation, she moved closer and assured him that she would handle the situation. He grew anxious, unsure of what her plan could possibly be. She, without showing any emotion, declared her plan to place her lips on his and use her breath to draw out the obstruction, believing this would help him breathe again. He insists that she must be out of her mind, unable to understand how her words could possibly be logical. Despite his hopes, life proved harsh, and the young boy faced a heartbreaking destiny. The following chapter would immediately plunge everyone into utter turmoil. With a bright smile, she announced that everything was fixed, having just removed the bone. He mumbled his gratitude, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He resumes eating, hoping that his actions will silence her chatter. After some time, he cleared his plate and acknowledged to himself that the fish tasted exceptional. He promised a reward of 25 cents to anyone who could figure out what her next move would be. He dismisses her attempt, explaining that he needs some time to himself right now. At that moment, she shifted her approach, using psychological tactics as she questioned whether he was already growing weary of her. The boy thinks quickly and cleverly explains that experts warn against exercising immediately after a meal, as it can negatively affect the body. He reasons that if a child were conceived under those circumstances, the baby's health could be at risk, and the pregnancy might face unnecessary complications. and naturally views all of his actions as a sign of his deep care for her, which stirs up strong emotions within her. She acknowledged the other person's reasoning and agreed to return later that night to resume their shared task. Before departing, she nonchalantly noted that her journey had taken her through a renowned city celebrated for its uniquely tailored clothing. He wonders aloud how that is relevant to the situation. She mentioned that she had purchased a combat uniform. The creature appeared formidable, encased in layers of protective armor. Anyone could tell exactly what was on his mind, simply by the expression he wore. He quickly makes it clear that those things don't interest him, showing that he values honesty and strong principles. He simply smiled, mentioning that she had been around for many years and had already seen every magazine in his collection. She chose to wear those black stockings every day, all because of him. The unfortunate young man stood frozen in disbelief, having always assumed her style was simply a unique fashion statement. He couldn't deny it. She had got everything just right, and he genuinely enjoyed what she picked out. She burst into laughter, teasing him by saying he was awful. She gives him a gentle wave, suggesting that he should get some rest. In an instant, she had disappeared, leaving him alone and trapped in that room. The narrator wished that the main character would find a way out soon. From an outsider's perspective, things might not seem too terrible, but the reality was different. It didn't make sense for anyone to remain trapped in a room without end. Character hesitated, realizing their earlier words had been premature. He was already awake, using his ability in an attempt to open the locked door. The boy revealed his cleverness by intentionally requesting the fish bone, which he now used as an improvised lockpick. As soon as he begins to tackle the task, hidden mechanism is activated as a result. 12 moved swiftly, slicing through the mechanism. He immediately stumbled backward, muttering quietly to himself in disbelief, convinced that she had to be joking. The idea of opening something so outrageous by hand seemed utterly impossible to him. According to a theory he read in one of his books, he needed to raise each lock pin precisely to the correct height. He had to do this carefully, making sure the delicate fishbone didn't snap, in order to unlock the mechanism. The difficult part was that he had succeeded in sneaking away only 4 fishbones without her noticing. To make matters worse, the task demanded a flawless performance 12 separate times. The challenge seemed nearly impossible. If a bone happened to snap while he worked on the lock, leaving any trace behind, she would instantly discover what he had done. He tried again, and just like before, the object broke with a sharp snap. He had already broken 3 of them, and this wasn't even the first. An hour and a half had passed, and he expected her to return with his meal at any moment. He reached out to the book, hoping to absorb a bit more information before time ran out. By now, the situation had grown far too complicated for anyone to simply push through with sheer force. He had already determined the precise height for the first 10 pins. Only the final 2 remained. He had reached a point where he had no options left. With everything on the line, he knew this was his final chance. At the same time, inside the kitchen, the pair of maids spent time together. Erica sampled a portion of the fish she had cooked. She had to concede that the meal tasted amazing. The beings that came from Lake were truly impressive. She expressed her gratitude to Erica, explaining that with Erica's assistance, she managed to complete her cooking an hour ahead of schedule. However, Erica grew curious about Anne's recent interest in mastering new dishes. She wondered aloud, since the young master had left for the academy and the madam was residing at the other estate to rest during her pregnancy, what reason Anne had for expanding her culinary skills now. Despite everything, Anne always prepares an additional serving of food. This behavior strikes others as odd. Anne's fingers inched toward her knife, a faint glow of manna beginning to swirl around her hand. Unable to hold back, suddenly interrupts. The person guessed that someone was keeping a secret pet in the area, most likely imagining it to be an adorable kitten. He tells them that the previous leaders of the household always banned pets due to concerns about shedding and cleanliness. With no one else nearby, it seemed logical that she would attempt to secretly bring one inside, and let out a sigh, admitting she had been discovered and asking for her secret to be kept. She asked for reassurance and responded without hesitation, assuring Anne that it was not an issue. Although she has never met him, she hopes that one day she will get the chance to see the little boy. Anne offered a gentle smile, explaining that perhaps someday things might change, but for now, it wasn't possible. She noted that he remained quite timid and was often frightened easily. As she walked away, relief washed over her as she reflected on how grateful she was that she hadn't needed to take the most drastic step, ending Erica's life and facing all the consequences that would have followed. That exchange, though, leads her to a new realization. Young Master's confinement in that room might eventually take a toll on him, leading to boredom or, even more troubling, frustration. Additionally, she notices that there is no movement in her abdomen, indicating that the pregnancy has not yet begun. It would be at least 10 more months before that could even start to happen. She considered that eating a pet might help ease the young master's nerves, and thought that a cat could be a suitable option. She considered simply approaching him and asking outright what he was looking for. Suddenly, a noticeable shift sweeps across her face. The tray slid from her grasp, sending the food tumbling noisily onto the floor. Upon arriving at the room, she notices that the door stands open. The boy had managed to break free at last. He was out, having finally escaped his confinement. Urgency filled the air as the search for him began. He was now concealed somewhere within a neglected section of the mansion, where broken furniture lay scattered and shadows filled the dust-choked rooms. He loses his balance and nearly falls. The character landed ungracefully, striking the earth with considerable force. The entire place was covered in grime, the lights barely worked, yet none of it seemed to matter. Because his body remembers this place, he is certain of his location. Although he lacks many useful skills, he does possess the ability to conjure a small glowing orb, a simple magic trick he knows well. The moment had arrived. He realized he must escape before she discovered his hiding place. Right as that thought crossed his mind, a sudden clang echoed nearby. Sharp blade struck the wall, embedding itself just inches from his head. He drew in a sharp breath, unable to believe what was happening. After all the distance he had covered, capture seemed unthinkable, yet in that moment a familiar voice reached his ears. Merging from the darkness, she appeared composed yet intimidating, silently revealing that she had at last discovered hope.